One is called Getting Real About Reparations. The other one is called White Slaves. He has authored 4 books, more than 100 articles, columns, and book reviews. He is a PhD, taught American West and California history at UCLA for about 15 years. Also is the author of Gunfighters, Highwaymen, Vigilantes. And if you watch History Channel documentary series, you see him frequently in a bunch of documentary series, including Cowboys and Outlaws, Wild West Tech, The President's Conquerors, and many others. He also is a Marine Corps vet, served as Lieutenant Colonel and Commanding Officer of the Naval Unit of the California State Military Reserve. He's also a pilot and a president of the Board of Directors, California State Military Museum Foundation. Please welcome to the back of the program, Dr. Roger McGrath. Roger, how are you?
Oh, thank you, Aaron. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Roger. I don't know about you, though. Rapper T.I. wants $44 trillion in slavery reparations. I don't know how much change you have lying around, Roger, but I think he wants it from you, not from me.
Well, I know some from you, too, Larry. Are you a taxpayer?
That is true.
You know what's wild about that is that the U.S. government never enslaved anyone.
That's right.
So why should the U.S. government, that is all of us taxpayers, be liable for that? It seems to me that if anybody is, it should be those who originally enslaved the people. And that was one or another of powerful West African tribes. That's where the slavery of the American blacks today began, Equatorial West Africa. And it was something that had been going on for thousands of years before any Europeans arrived there, let alone Americans that got in the game very late.
Roger, most people's feeling about slavery, I believe, came from the program Roots, where Kunta Kinte was minding his own business, walking down the jungle, and some white guys with a big net grabbed him. As if the slaves were snatched one at a time like that by white slavers who were brave enough and had enough immunity to diseases to go into the interior and grab people. That's not how it went down, was it?
Yeah, that would have been absolutely a very rare case, if at all. What would happen most commonly? One tribe would make war on another tribe, and the tribe that lost would be enslaved. As simple as that. And that was going on, as far as we know, for thousands of years. There were also raids by one tribe, maybe to a tribe in the interior, and brought back captives. And then there were families that sold their children to pay their debts into slavery.
Mm-hmm.
So those were the common ways that black Africans were enslaved.
And Doctor, the most blacks who were enslaved in Africa remained in Africa in bondage to other Africans.
Well, of course. I mean, and to this day,
Mm-hmm.
there is slavery in Africa, which very few people like to mention.
Now, you've talked a lot about how universal slavery was, and the fact is that there were white slaves, there were Irish who were indentured servants, many of them treated, in fact, worse than slaves. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, that's another little-known fact of slavery. Slavery was not reserved for blacks because of their race. Slavery is old as man himself. And slavery in the Americas in the 1630s, tens of thousands of slaves from Ireland began to be shipped to Barbados and other islands there of the Eastern Caribbean. Something like 100,000 altogether. Technically, it could be said they were indentured servants. However, the majority didn't sign any contract of indenture. They were simply rounded up by Cromwell's soldiers in Ireland after the Cromwellian Wars in Ireland, which left so many families without a male head to the family because the Irishman had died or were sent into exile, and his wife and children were vulnerable. They were collected, put in pins, and branded with the name of the ship letters representing the name of the ship, slave ship, that would take them to the Americas, islands in the Caribbean. And this went down to children, 7, 8-year-old children. They were sold at auction in Barbados, in Martinique, in Montserrat, in St. Lucia, all of these islands. And there, very few of them lasted much more than 6 or 7 years because of the sun, skin cancer, all sorts of diseases, malnourishment, incredibly hard labor, because the owners of them didn't expect to keep them for 40 years. They expected, well, they're going to be freed after 7 years. Some were extended, of course, because of minor infractions. Another 2 or 3 years was added to their indenture. The few lucky ones who American colonies, but that was only a tiny minority. Most of them died there in the Caribbean.
I'm talking to historian Dr. Roger McGrath. He taught at UCLA for 15 years. He's got a couple of pieces we have up on LarryElder.com, Getting Real About Reparations. The other one is called White Slaves. Roger, you've also talked about the fact that there were blacks who owned slaves and also Native Americans who owned slaves.
Well, upwards of 4,000 free blacks in the American South in 1870 owned slaves. Something over 20,000 black slaves were owned by black slave masters. And this is right on the eve of the Civil War. And in fact, they continued owning them right through the Civil War and down to the enactment of the 13th Amendment.
Dr. McGrath, let's hold it right here because I want to find out what percentage of slave owners around 1860 were black. I'm sure it's a small number, but I want to get some idea of the perspective of that. Roger McGrath is my guest. Do not leave town.
Larry will be right back. Stay tuned.